So you can imagine my shock and horror when Arabella was up here earlier speaking about making no small plans. And I said, oh my God, she's taken my speech. So I changed it, and now we're just going to cross out small. And we're going to basically say, make no plans. Oh, I know. You might think it's hilarious now, but wait till I'm done. Find the terror. So you may, as Matt talked about, you may wonder how I got to where I got to. Clearly, I had this all planned out. Clearly, when I was a young child, this was all part of the plan. You know, I've been everywhere. That's me in the lower right-hand corner. Got a bunch of patents. I look different with clothes, with no shirt on. I've floated around the world 100 times, you know, so clearly this was all arranged. I had this in my head from a young age. I was going to be a tech dork. I was going to work on a really hard problem, which is finding stuff in the world in search. Well, actually, I'll tell you a story about how I got here. When I was 2, I refused to be called anything else but Bob Barker, which you may not know for those of you who are in Parker now. He was a game show host in the 70s. In fact, I actually wouldn't respond to anything but Bob Barker my entire second year. I used a garden hose as my microphone. True story. And then when I hit 5, I decided to break out of entertainment and go into sales. And this is me at age 5, like 4 or 5. I would go up to the church on Sundays and erect a lemonade stand, and I would wait till I got out of church. They'd all walk out, and I would say, I'm right here to sell you your lemonade. And I would make a killing every weekend. And these are spy shots from my father, who would hide to make sure I wasn't going to be abducted, because I refused to have any adults around me at any given time. Then I decided to break out of the manual labor that I was doing and break into franchising at age 8, and decided to go and get all the water rights at gas stations around my neighborhood and then license those water rights out to people who wanted to have car washes. So it's a nice franchise model. I had a ton of money back then. I lost it all in the great crash of '87. Finally, when I was 9, I decided to break into computers, and that's when it all went to hell in a handbasket. We did a lot of very, very bad things. So if you have any questions about how to do bad things, come talk to me. I can tell you how. We did a lot of very, very interesting things back then, and it got me thinking, you know, a lot about what I could do. But that kind of went on. I moved to Australia to escape the clutches of the Department of Justice. I sold garbage pail kids to Australians who thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I undercut the school cafeteria by selling chocolate and Smarties underneath their prices by importing them to the U.S. Embassy. I even whacked down Camaros in shipping containers and reversed the wheels to the right-hand side because Australians, they love their Camaros. So really, you could look at all these things and say, what is this common thread? Like, what is this? And you could say it's greed. You know, you could say it's Gordon Gekko, that I enjoyed taking people's money. You could say that. It's not true, though. What it actually was, something I call sagacity. Not that I call the English language calls it this, but I use it here. Sagacity is having or showing acute mental discernment and keen practical sense. Sounds like I'm being a bit grandiose to myself, and don't worry, I'll get rid of that in a few minutes. But what it really means is, you have to be able to take advantage of these situations. And I mean, when I was a kid, I would see these people coming out of church by my front room, and I would say, I can sell to them. That's an obvious audience I can go after. When I was in Australia, I said, I can use my connections at the U.S. Embassy to actually import chocolate duty-free. What a great scam that is. When I was with computers, I was able to see the potential of phone phreaking and how we could make 1976 calls and charge those calls to a bank in Ohio. It's a true story. We did it all the time. It was great. And then, of course, coming to Microsoft, I kind of bounced around. Like, I didn't really know where I was going, but I was always able to say, there's something there. I think I can go do that. And in every case, in all my jobs at Microsoft, right, going from the lowest guy to where I'm at now, which is not much higher, I could actually, there's always somebody more qualified than me, always someone smarter than me, always someone more prepared than me, every single time. But in every case, I won. So that's the kind of point of the talk today is, how can you win when you're not supposed to? And I'll tell you how. I think it is, the answer is, I want you to make no plans. And I'll tell you why. Now, of course, the first thing you're going to say, your parents are saying, oh my God, what is he saying to my child? And so you obviously have to, you can't just walk out of Francis Parker at grade 12 and say, I'm just going to go wing it. That's not going to work. You need some kind of argument that you can use that will justify this existence. An argument that will let you kind of, in fact, you're told over and over, this happens. You heard us today, make no small plans. No, forget it. You want to live a different type of existence. You want to live a different approach to life. So today I'm going to present you an argument in 3 parts that you can use to justify the fact that you're not going to make any plans. Here's the first one. This is kind of scary for those of you out there. Your brain is not your own. It's true. How many folks here think you actually have some modicum of control over your brain? A lot of us think we do, right? We can, yeah, thank you for the pity hand. I like that. And of course, we say the hindbrain controls autonomic functions, and we know respiration and cardiac rhythm is all controlled. We give the brain that. But we assume that we actually do have some control over our brain. We think if we can put our mind to it, if we can just focus, we can do anything. Right? We're always told, put your mind to it. It's so easy. Well, I've got some bad news. And true to form, the brain is not our own. In fact, my buddy, who's a neuroscientist, did some research. And the research is very interesting. Well, first, before I get to the research, I want to give you some Neuroscience 101, because it's very important for the rest of the story. So in 1940, Brumer and Postman theorized that visual perceptions are made coherent on the basis of implicit mental frameworks. I mean, duh, right? Of course, I got that. But what it means is that we all know that dogs have 4 legs, and if you see a dog in the street with 3 legs, your brain will actually paint in the 4th leg as you see them. And so really what it means is we see what we want to see. But a funny thing happens. When we see what we don't expect, bad things happen in our brains. They malfunction. They go a little haywire. So here's what he did for his experiment. Oh, and by the way, yeah, when they go haywire, they usually go haywire in the wrong direction of the good. They go towards the Vader. So here's what he did. He had 2 rooms of people, and he had 2 proctors, or people who administered this little test. And the proctors told both rooms the same thing, that you are now judges, and you have to judge the penalty for a prostitute who was caught prostituting, and you have to assign her a monetary fine, basically. And they gave him some guidelines and some rules, and then both proctors left the rooms. About 2 minutes later, they came back into the rooms, except in the first room, the proctor was actually different. She's the one on the left was the original one, the one on the right was the new one. And in the other room, the proctor was the same. That's the control group for the geeks out there. Well, what happened? Well, they went ahead and assigned the fines for the prostitutes. Now, here's one thing. Only 10% of the people in the first room where the person changed even noticed she had changed. So only 10% noticed. But they fined the prostitute 200% of the other room. They doubled the fine of the other room. So what this means is 90% of folks didn't know anything had changed, yet they were twice as harsh on the prostitute as the room where there was no change. What does this tell us? It tells us that we are not fully in control of our faculties. Things happen around us and to us that actually cause us to do things we wouldn't normally do. And this is especially important if you think about planning and making all these plans. We are now saying that your brain is actively working against you. So planning all this stuff is going to give you no benefit whatsoever. That's the first arrow in your quiver. The second one, the universe is out to get you, or not, depending on how you look at it. So we're going to go ahead and talk about something that I love dearly. It's called chaos theory. And chaos theory has been just bastardized in the common media, but it's still fun to do. I'll do it again here today. But it was a theory by Dr. Norton Lorenz, and he theorized this because he was trying to predict weather models, and they kept turning out incorrectly, and he couldn't figure out why. It's a long story. Talk to me afterwards. I'll give you all the details. But basically, it was popularized by Ashton Kutcher in a seminal film, piece of verite, Butterfly Effects. So what Ashton did, actually I can't even do it. Ashton has nothing to do with chaos theory whatsoever, except for how he's famous. I digress. What chaos theory says is small, localized permutations in complex systems produce widespread consequences throughout the system. Again, duh, we get it, right? Step and move on, we understand the point. But that's probably a little too complex for a Saturday, so let's have Steven Spielberg and Jeff Goldblum actually try to tell us what chaos theory actually is. If you would mind running that clip, please. This is far better than I could ever do. And she's going to talk soon. Oh, we don't want to see this part. Skip to 37. Go on. Perfect. Close enough.
I'm not clear on chaos.
It's simply deals with predictability in a complex system.
Yeah, and that's not quite what I was going for. There we go.
The shorthand is the butterfly effect. A butterfly can flap its wings at Peking, and in Central Park you get rain instead of sunshine.
Why?
I did I go too fast? I go too fast. I did a flyby. No, give me that big glass of water. We're going to conduct an experiment. It should be still. The car's bouncing up and down, but that's okay. It's just an example. Now, then put your hand flat like a hieroglyphic. Right? Now, let's say a drop of water falls in your hand. Which way is the drop going to roll off? Which finger or over the thumb or
Thumb.
Aha, okay. Okay, now freeze your hand, freeze your hand. Don't move. I'm going to do the same thing, start with the same place again. Which way is it going to roll off?
Let's say back. Same one.
Same back. Change. Why? Because tiny variations, the orientation of the hairs and the hands.
Yeah, look at this.
Blood distending the vessels, imperfections in the skin.
Imperfections in the skin?
Microscopic, microscopic. And never repeat and vastly affect the outcome. That's one.
Unpredictability.
Right?
I think we've seen enough of Jeff Goldblum being a stud.
See?
I mean, this is like a geek's dream, right? To have a scientist get a girl by using chaos theory, and this is like the greatest day of my life to watch that actually happen. Doesn't work. In case you're curious, I tried it. But the point of this is that what he said was actually accurate, is that doing the same thing, you expect to have the same outcome. But in actuality, in many cases, it doesn't work. And this is, of course, directly in contradiction of Newton's determinism theories, which basically say the world's predictable. In fact, this is what the entire world is based on. The entire natural universe is based on this notion that things are predictable. If I drop a ball right here, it'll bounce and return to about half its height, then bounce again and return to another half its height until it eventually comes to rest. It's a theory, it's an equation. I can map it out, very, very simple. And in fact, what your parents, when they tell you to go plan, they say do this and this will happen. That's what they're trying to say. But of course, we know they're lying. They're just lying to us. It's not going to happen because of chaos. It's because determinism and Newton's theories work well in places like vacuums. But unless you're going to go live in space, life is a little more complex, and therefore chaos theory takes over. And so as Jeff Goldblum so beautifully said to Laura Dern in that clip, the best laid plans, your best laid plans, will likely go awry, really. And what it means is that let's say, if you do X, Y will happen. That's what you're thinking in your head. And let's say if X is I'm going to work really hard and Y is I get into Harvard. Well, the smallest changes in the initial conditions of that X variable, meaning that maybe you mocked a kid in history class, that guy in history class, and that guy in history class then went home on Friday night and studied so hard and got his essay just beautifully written for Harvard, was so stoked, and he got it off to Harvard just ahead of you. Because you mocked him in history class 6 months earlier, his application may arrive at Harvard a day before yours. And that application committee may read it and see it, and even though you're exactly the same qualification and you followed exactly the same paths, tiny variations in those initial conditions result in vastly different outcomes. You not getting in and him getting in. What a bummer. I mean, it truly is. So that is that second reason why plans are overrated, is that chaos will take you over. And so basically at this point I've told you, you are now an out of control, out of your mind, crazy person, and the universe is out to get you. This is an upper talk, obviously. Sorry about that, Matt. So the last thing I want to talk about, the third arrow in your quiver, the third thing you can use tonight around the dinner table to convince your parents that you should go live the life like those two guys on the bikes going from Paris to Shanghai, is that, I want that job, is that greatness comes from stumblers. Now, I'm going to go ahead and caveat this piece by alerting you ahead of time that this is what we call, those of you in philosophy or taking philosophy, a logical fallacy. Meaning that I'm going to say some stuff here, which if you're paying attention, you'll quickly realize, that makes no sense. But luckily, most folks don't, and your parents certainly don't. So you go ahead and use this, and it'll be perfect. So I want to talk a bit about things that were created by accident, or things that were created using sagacity. The first is the X-ray. People spent years figuring out what to do with those penetrating rays when electrons strike a metal plate. They tried all this stuff. They couldn't figure it out. Finally, some guy in Germany stuck his hand in front of it and was trying to put objects there, and all of a sudden, you could see his bones behind it. Total fluke. Now, of course, he had a glowing hand after that for a long time, but the point was that was how X-rays were discovered. Same thing with microwaves. Percy, what's his name? I forget. Percy something or other. In 1940, was working at Raytheon, and he was looking at new vacuum tubes, which means nothing to any of you in the audience if you're under 30. But the vacuum tubes, he was trying to figure out, and he was sitting there, and he was messing with it, and all of a sudden, he felt this area getting warm. Now, hold on, no dirty minds. He had a chocolate bar in there, and it was melting all over his pants. And so then he thought, well, I'm going to try popcorn. And so he put popcorn down there, and then that's how chocolate popcorn was invented. But also how, true, the microwave was actually invented totally by accident. Finally, Post-it notes. I love Post-it. This is like a double win story, because Post-it notes, First of all, it's like a massive failure. This guy at 3M was trying to make an adhesive, a sticky stuff, and it wasn't sticky enough. It didn't work. And so in 1968, he said, screw it, I'm done, I'm out. This is a complete failure. This glue is not going to stick to anything. In 74, some other guy at 3M actually was trying to figure out how to hold a place in his hymnal book at church. And he remembered. He used his sagacity to say, there was this really crappy glue that guy developed 6 years ago. It's just sticky enough to hold some paper in place, and lo and behold, we now have Post-it notes in every country on the planet. So, of course, the point here is that the things that we take for granted today, and people say were happy accidents, that's garbage. The people who invented these things were going along their plan, going on their merry way to figure out how to build something, and something interfered, chaos or a paradigm shift or sagacity, and they followed that path. And if they hadn't followed that path, if they'd been rigid in their thinking, we wouldn't have these things today, and because indeed they were sagacious. So, how does one, I guess the last thing I'll talk about here, so now I think basically you've won, right? You claim that I don't have to plan anymore because it's fruitless. In fact, I think the way to close it here is to say this, that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, which I think is so true. And in fact, in this case, the enemy isn't even the Axis powers or the Allied powers. In this case, the enemy is, of course, your brain, the whole natural universe, and Microsoft Project. Those are the three things that are your enemy. So you're kind of screwed, because Project alone could take you out if it had to. I worked on that for a little while. So, what do we do? Yeah, we're in a bad place, aren't we? What do we do? When I talk to my team, I tell them two things to compensate for all this. I say, I know in general what area we're going to end up. But I have little idea how we're going to get there. And I tell them we have to embrace sagacity. We have to be sagacious. But how do you do this? Like, how do you practically be sagacious? How do you practically embrace chaos? How do you practically say, I think I could go ahead and do this? And it's something I call the Tarzan method. And when I say I call it this, I mean I made that up for this talk. But the Tarzan method is very, very simple. The Tarzan method basically says this. You are Tarzan. And you awake one morning in the forest. It's misty, it's beautiful, birds are chirping. And Cheetah, your little sidekick's next to you. And frankly, you're a bit hungover because you had too much jungle juice the night before. And you know you have to get back to see Jane, your beautiful wife, across the jungle, but you don't really know, you got to get there. And you know kind of where you are, you think, and you know kind of where she is, you think. And so you get up in the trees and you look at your vine and you say, I've got my vine, and I know the path I can take to get from here to Jane fairly simply. The problem is the vines aren't just yours. Other creatures are on the vines, monkeys and birds, and they're moving vines, and vines are falling, and vines aren't there, you thought were there. And so literally you start going, you start moving, you start just going forward, and you go from vine to vine to vine. And in many cases, the place where you thought there was a vine actually isn't. So what do? You go to an adjacent vine, or you swing at a much longer arc and go to the vine 2 down. The point is, you're moving forward, and you're making slight variations in your path to get you where you think you have to be. So the challenge then, of course, is not to plan, but to basically grow your vines. Like, how do you grow your own vines to navigate your way through this crazy forest? I'll give you three ways that I tell the team to grow your vines. The first is to curate your own personal networks. What does this mean? There's a guy named Valdez Krebs. Valdez Krebs, what a great name. And Valdez is a network theorist, which is also a great title. But he basically says, what you know depends a lot on who you know, which depends a lot on what you know, which depends a lot on who you know. And this goes forever until you go insane. But the point is that really your personal networks, in many cases, help you form what things that you can do. The fact that I sold chocolates that undercut the canteen's prices in Australia because I happen to know somebody at the embassy who happened to be able to get me the chocolates at a really good rate and duty-free, that's all because of my personal networks. And today I curate them quite carefully. It doesn't mean that you go and do those LinkedIn things and bug people unnecessarily, but it certainly means that if you can offer advice, if you can reach out to folks when you're in their city, these types of things to kind of keep those people close, you can do a lot of good. Second way to grow your vines, always take the first call. This one I get a lot of flack for internally. My email address, my phone number, really easy to find on the web, anyone can find it. And so I have a rule which says anyone can call me from anywhere in the world or email me, and I'll always take the first meeting. It's 15 minutes. Might be at 6 a.m., might be at 10 p.m., but I'll take that first call. And you get 15 minutes to pitch me on something, whether it be a crazy business idea or a company or whatever. Now, I won't take the second call in many cases because half of them are actually crazy. But for the ones that are amazing, great things happen. In fact, we did an entire project last year called Redo, which was an effort to kind of jumpstart education reform in America based on a single phone call that I got from somebody I knew in Los Angeles through the Sundance Foundation, blah, blah, blah. End of story. Through all those crazy connections and taking that first call, we built this really great platform to help raise the conversation around educational reform. And the last thing, and this is a difficult one, especially when you're in school because you're in these subjects all day long, but it's thinking horizontally. So today you're taught in a lot of depth, and you need depth for some things. If you're a cardiac surgeon, you want depth. If you're writing search algorithms, it's nice to have depth. But in many cases, what you really need to find those innovations, to find those vines, to grow those vines, is breadth. It takes more time, of course, to build breadth. It takes many more data inputs to get that breadth, but the ability to see things across subjects is key. In fact, if you recall, because everyone else has mentioned Apple today, I will too. Steve Jobs, in his commencement speech, which I'm sure you've watched after he passed, we talked about how he was in calligraphy class at an early age and how calligraphy actually had a dramatic effect on the outcome of the Mac. Now, who would have thought calligraphy and a Mac were in any way the same universe, but in fact they were. That because he was a horizontal thinker, he was able to actually build that beautiful piece of hardware, although Windows is better. No, yes. So, again, here's the takeaway from this crazy walk down Stefan's memory. Be like Tarzan. It's very, very simple. Grow your vines, personal networks, horizontal thinking. You can do it. And embrace the chaos. And if you can do those three things, you, like me, will win even when you shouldn't. Thanks a lot.